I don't know what's going on here.
What you mean?
Do you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. Oh.
I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to leave and come back in. Something's going weird on me.
Is your screen not up?
No, I'll be right back.
She'll be right back, y'all. Oh, we are going to get into it today with Coach Renz. He has a channel called Why I Left Religion, and I've watched him several times. He's just a very interesting man that has lots of experiences, and even to include going to Mecca, going to the Vatican. You know, like myself, I was in the military and he was in the Marines. Yeah, I'm trying to say I was a punk because I was in the Army, y'all, but I was in the Army and I did my part, okay? But anyway, it's really interesting because being a veteran, like we get to go overseas and see some of these places. Like I was able to go to the Vatican myself at the time because I had on tank top. I wasn't allowed to go inside the Vatican. So I was like on a mad dash to find a scarf to go put around my arm so that I could make it inside the Vatican. But by the time I found the scarf, I was not, it closed. So visiting hours was over. I never went to Mecca or anything. But I remember when I was over in Germany, I don't even remember the name of the Pope, but that one particular Pope was chosen from Germany. They, while we were in Germany, we spent a lot of time going to different castles and churches and stuff. I mean, to look at how extensive the robes are, it's like being a part of that priesthood. It is like being rich because you might not have money in your bank account, but you're eating out of like very expensive cauldrons and you're wearing very expensive clothes and you pretty much have the best of the best available to you because you're in that position and you're basically like, yeah, you're being catered to in so many levels. That's a real job. It's a real, and it looks like it pays well. I don't know what kind of money they have after, but then I guess that's probably why they never leave, right? But he, had some experiences like myself as a Jehovah's Witness growing up. I had my own experiences and curiosities. I remember my mom having all these questions and she would quiz those ladies during Bible study and they could not answer all her questions. And so it got to where my mom just stayed home. But me, I remember reading my book of Bible stories when I was growing up. And I remember just reading certain scriptures that said, write the scriptures on your heart and basically remember them. So even though my mom quit going, I kept going because I was like, I'm not trying to go to hell. I was little, but I was like scared to death. I think I told Tyler this story too one time about how I heard this loud boom of lightning or thunder and I jumped out of my bed. I said, oh, Jesus is coming back right now. I was so scared. I was just like, but then I also know how I felt growing up, which was like this. I felt like we were constantly being told about hell, constantly being told about the end of the world. It really got to the point where I felt like, why are we going to college or trying to plan for a future when we're all going to die? And basically, when I was younger, the only thing I really wanted to do was, number one, be able to get married, 2, have sex, and 3, have kids. So those were like my biggest concerns growing up. Is just let me get these 3. But then, and Coach Renz is coming in the room. But then I also remember too being like, they said, there's a new heaven and a new earth. And I said, okay. And I didn't know which one I wanted to go to because you think, oh, do I get to choose which one I go to? And I said, do you get to have sex in heaven? And they said, no. And I said, I don't want to go there. I want to go to the new earth so I can still have sex. That's what I was like when I was young. But I had a weird story too, because here I went to college and I got baptized in college. Every time I would go to a different place, I would try to go find a church or try to belong to a church and stuff. And I just would go places and not feel like people loved each other or they even liked each other. I remember I went to one church in West Virginia where the whole church was family. It was just aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers. And I felt so unwelcomed. You know what I mean? So it's like, it was just very strange. So, but still, I could never understand I went to Church of Christ. And I could never understand the idea too of how can you say a Buddhist or a Hindu was going to hell? That's number one. But number two, those religions are older than Christianity. So it just, none of it made sense to me. I didn't understand why people were going to hell. And then I didn't understand why it seemed like that was the focus, was we're all going to hell. It just kind of makes you feel like, what is there to live for? I don't know, Terry, if you had any positive experiences. Like I had positive experiences. I met lots of really nice people, that helped me, but those were things that just made me stressed out.
Well, there's no picture. That's okay. What when I was growing up, I grew up in a very ethnic community, and so we would go to church, and it was in a language that I didn't understand. But there was I felt I had a spiritual component. And so I was always wanting to know more and more about information, but I wasn't getting that from the church. And then I would ask my mother, and she said, well, I don't know. And so there was always this question. For me, it was always a questioning more and more. And, in the community I grew up in, the church was very central, and religious holidays were very central, but there was never that deep teaching about what they meant. So yeah.
Yeah. Coach Renz is here.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I had an introduction to you while you were not here yet. I told people how you were talking trash about me being in the Army, but like I was a cream puff or something.
Really? That's what we doing.
Yeah, I like it. It's all natural.
All right. It's all right. We're still on the same team. We're on the same team.
And we're on the team of knowledge. So that's going to be it, right? We're going to always be on the same team. But I was explaining to people how you have your own journey. I don't know what your childhood journey was, but I know that you were able to go overseas to Mecca and to the Vatican. And I shared, like, I had my little tiny visit to the Vatican, didn't really make it inside, but my life over in Germany, we spent a lot of time going to visit castles and churches, but you just, you're opening up and you're just letting people know what you saw, how you felt. And I guess I'm really curious, and Terry has some questions for you too, but you are a business owner in Atlanta. You got a nice cigar bar.
Cigar lounge.
Or lounge. What's the difference? What's that about?
A cigar bar is exactly, it's all within the name. A cigar bar it has a bar, sells liquor. It's more the bar atmosphere, picking up people. That's what. Cigar lounge is we don't sell liquor, BYOB, and it's more about sitting around and having conversations, networking, getting to know people. That's what it is.
Okay. BYOB.
So I have questions.
All right.
So my one question I have is, do you have women at your lounges?
Oh, yes.
Are women smoking cigars?
Yes, especially in Atlanta. About 30% of my customers are women.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And so,
I was telling Erica earlier, I never really smoked cigarettes, but I always enjoyed a good cigar.
I like you. Like Terry. But yes, we have quite a few women that come through. I mean, there are times where it's more women than men in here.
Wow.
Oh,
Not often, but it happens.
It's cool though.
But
and do you, now your cigars, are they custom made for you? Or do you have a special blend that would be your signature cigar? Or
yes, I do have my cigar. I have a cigar that I blended and I have it manufactured by Big Boys cigars down in the Dominican Republic. It's a Nicaraguan Dominican blend, mostly Nicaraguan. And then I carry 249 other cigar brands, cigar faces, Perdomo's, Plasencia, Padron, everybody else. We carry a lot, but there are 14,000 different cigars out there. So can't carry everything.
Yeah.
So basically, there's almost as many cigars as there are churches.
Yes, and some of them need to smoke a cigar and calm down. But
yeah, yeah,
that would be true.
And so,
go ahead.
What would you like to share about your background first? Like, where would you like to start? Because usually it's childhood. And I used to just be petrified during my childhood. All I could think about was we all going to hell. I just want to have sex and get married and have at least one baby before I die. I was like in such a hurry because I felt like, oh, we're all going to die. We're all going to hell.
It wasn't quite like that for me. I've always been a very inquisitive person from day one, and from as far back as I can remember. I used to sit in my grandmother's dining room and read the encyclopedias. The green and white ones, if I want to show you how old I am, green and white ones.
Oh, right.
I don't think most people remember those. But the journey for me started when I was 9 years old, and the pastor was up there and he was preaching and he was talking about how, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven. And he held up a sewing needle and said that it was impossible for a camel to ever go through a sewing needle. And, I tried to figure it out for months and months. I was like, if I liquefy the camel, I was trying to figure it out because I grew up poor. And I was like, okay, well, I shouldn't say poor. I grew up lower middle class. But I was just like, I got to figure this out because I don't want to experience this lifestyle the rest of my life. And this man just said it's sinful to be rich, because he literally said if you become rich, you won't go to heaven. You're sinful and all that. Then about a year or so later, and I'm asking multiple questions about other things that he's preaching about, I find out that he can't read. So now I'm of the mindset of, you can't read, how can you teach me what a book says if you can't read the book? And so I stopped asking him questions, and I started asking other people and other deacons. Come to find out, most of them couldn't read either. So now I'm like, okay, none of these guys can read. So how are they studying to show themselves approved if they cannot read? Because you're now just trusting that whoever has translated something to you is truthful. That means I could be holding up a book, the Bible, and just saying what I want to say. Now, of course, there are other people who have read it and they know it, so they can catch you in that situation. But still, how can you read anything else? How can you study history? How can you study archaeology? How can you study anything if you cannot read? So that bothered me. And around about 12 years old, because I was causing such a ruckus in different churches around Marietta, Georgia, my grandmother released me from going to church, so I didn't have to go anymore.
Wow.
Told me to just, continue studying, and hopefully you'll come to your resolution at some point. I mean, her hope was, of course, was for me to come to be Christian, but she was very open and protective in allowing me to go on this journey. The rest of my family, they didn't ostracize me or anything like that. Now, the greater community ostracized the hell out of me. They were very, very much in the mindset of he's a demon, he's got this antichrist knowledge, all these other kind of name calling. So I wasn't very well liked by the church community where I grew up. So, but my family was respected, so I didn't catch too many problems because nobody was going to really mess with my grandfather. It was one of those kind of communities. So I had some level of insulation, but it was still incredibly lonely because other than this other guy that I knew, we were the only two people I knew who thought that way. But in that, I spent so much time in the library. I started spending hours upon hours every week in the library, studying and reading everything I could possibly find. Honestly, a lot of the homeless guys were more helpful than anybody else, because they practically lived in the library. So they knew what reference books, where everything was. And if I'm reading something concerning Constantine, they knew what other reference books or other books to go get for me to also read. So some of these guys would also bring me books out of the library saying, if you're reading this book, you need to read that book. And they would help me break down things because I was young, I'm going to the library at 10 years old. My library card was more prized than a license. I'm going to the library and these guys are just feeding me information because I'm there all the time. So it was a wonderful experience in that. But then comes the military. And when I go to the Marine Corps, I was still struggling because I got married soon after I graduated boot camp. And she was still Christian, dated through high school. But then I got a chance to I remember going across the Atlantic. And I was so frustrated with all the issues that I faced with other people because they was trying to tell me that you have this prison knowledge, you have this antichrist knowledge, you go to hell, and all this kind of thing. I had a great desire to be Christian. I really wanted to be Christian. So I made a deal. I said, God, I know that we're stopping in Israel. Let me be able to go to Constantine's ark and see that he put you all on his ark. And then I know that he had the dream that Eusebius Caesarea claimed. Let me be, when I go to Israel, I knew we was going to go to Israel. When I go to Israel, let me find something there that shows me that all this other stuff I'm reading is Antichrist information. And I just need to stick to the Bible. But it all happened opposite. I get to Rome. Well, we was actually in Gaeta, but Rome is up the street. We get to Rome. I go up to Rome. Let me rephrase it. We get to Gaeta. I'm talking to the 6th Fleet commander, which was weird because at my rank, I shouldn't have been talking to the 6th Fleet commander. And he gets me, I tell him what I'm interested in. And he makes it possible for me to go to Rome and to go up to the Arch of Constantine. I get up there because I understood at the time how these people functioned back then. Once you conquer something and you want to express it, you build some type of monument. When he built the monument, you would have thought, since he saw this in this image, I will conquer, and everybody painted crosses on their shields, that would have been on the monument, but it wasn't. There was absolutely nothing Christian on that monument. It was everything on that monument was still Apollo worship and Mithra worship. So how does a man who conquers in the name of Jesus put up Apollo and Mithra? So I realized the dream had to be fake. So then I started studying Eusebius of Caesarea even more, and realized that when he wrote that story, the first time he wrote the story of the Battle of the Bridge at Moldavia, when Constantine defeated Maxentius, he said nothing about a cross in the sky or Jesus visiting Constantine in his tent. It's 13 years later when Constantine is in Milan talking to Christian bishops, and when he compares Jesus to Sol Invictus, that's when Constantine tells this story and changes the narrative. And that's when Eusebius changed the narrative. So it was a propaganda lie to win favor with the Christian bishops that were in Rome at the time, or in Italy at the time. So because Constantine needed to keep Christianity under control because they were fighting each other throughout the Roman Empire, the Christians were. There wasn't this golden era of Christianity that I thought. But then I get to Israel, and as a Christian would say, but God, right? You know how to say that one, but God.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting that the first impactful thing that happens to me in Israel is that I'm going on a tour, and we're going through the Muslim market, and right before we go out of the market, the tour guide says, for all my Christians, we're now going through the eye of a needle. And we walk up, and I see that this thing is like 8 feet tall, about 7, 8 feet wide. It has the kind of the shape, you know, and I'm just looking at this. So my first question that started my whole process is the first thing that I really see when I get to Israel, right? Because the way the tour went, we didn't go, that was the first biblical thing that we saw. So we go through the Muslim market, Eye of the Needle, then it was going to the Wailing Wall, right? And then from there, you go into the Church of the Sepulchre and all that. So I'm sitting there, and the group leaves, and I go in and out, in and out. I had to traverse that thing about 10, 15 times. Forgot about the group. I'm in a foreign country. I'm 20 years old. I'm by myself. I let the group go on about their business because my first question, and here's the answer. And then this gentleman, David Hasid, he was an archaeologist and historian. He sees me going in and out of this door. And he said, you must be you must be an American who just figured out what the eye of a needle is. And I was like, yes. And this is such, BS. Because I can easily walk through this. And remind you, I came from Desert Storm, so I had just saw a camel like a couple of weeks ago. So I knew exactly how big a camel was. But he explained to me what the narrative would have meant to the people back then, as far as you having to take all your stuff off of you. A camel was like the SUV back then. So right. Fully loaded camel couldn't go through that doorway. So a person would have to not be in love with all their possessions and all that sort of thing. So I understood that. And so I understood what the meaning was. So it made me realize that a rich person can't go to heaven. So, because I was still, kind of don't know which way I want to go at the time. So I still made it fit the narrative of wanting to be Christian. But meeting David and studying with him, pen paling with him and studying with him, and he introduced me to other archaeologists and scholars, and showed me how to study things as if I was getting a PhD, by doing peer reviews and studying both sides of the fence and understanding etymology of words and cultural significance and the different historical cultural things. So he really taught me, and then him and the others that he introduced me to taught me how to study, taught me how to connect things together. And that experience over the next 5 years is what finally got me to the point where I said, okay, the book has some wisdom in it, but it is not a book of the creator. It is not a book of pure divinity. There's a lot of man-made propaganda, cultural significance, bullying of people and women. So that all in all, right around 2025 is when I finally just said, okay, you know what? I can't straddle this fence anymore. I have to completely walk away. So that's somewhat my journey in a long format. And since then, I just, I studied more and more. I've learned more and more. I started understanding alchemy, the Hermetics. I studied Buddhism for a little while, Hindu. I studied all the religions, at least for a little while, to get a basic knowledge of them. I do like the Tibetan Buddhism more so than Indian Buddhism. The Tao, one of my favorite books of all time. And the Kabbalion, one of my favorite books of all time. So to me, it's all about going as far back to the source as possible, but then letting from the source, standing on accumulative wisdom all the way up. Because even at the source, sometimes it can be propagandized. It could be not fully understood or developed, at that time of their writing.
So I'm a positive because you said a lot. You blow my mind with the eye and needle to know that is really a place that solidifies some things. I think what happens is that people can place a value on things based on where they would like to start in time. And that's going to be very convenient because you're like, oh, no, we're just looking at this period. And so if you look at the time period of this Bible that we have, then yeah, you're on straight, right? This is right. Down pat. But then you have to say, well, where did the books come from? And then you could go back to the Council of Nicaea. But then you have to say, okay, so individually, where do each of these books come from? And it's this huge, long list. There's this huge, long list of books, and you're trying to make sense of this one book. But if you don't understand that one of the books is written 700 years ago, another one's written 1,000 years ago, one of them's written 2,000 years ago, then these are pieces of things that all belong to a bunch of different people, and you try to sew it together to make it one thing. This is like if I try to make a sheet and a blanket and a rug, and I'm trying to make it all into one nice comforter, and I'm like, damn, this comforter don't feel quite right. It's a little bit weird. Right. And I think it's really strange too, because like for a Black Christian, where are you getting this book that you're ready to beat other people over the head with? And I feel like here it is for a lot of us, we're like trying to force ourselves to be the people in the book. And it's like, I don't think we're the people in that book. And, right now too, I see people saying like, oh, we're Anunnaki. And you're like, we're Anunnaki. So it's like, I'm really allergic to slavery. So I don't want to claim that I'm a part of any of that. Okay. So, and then the whole thing for me has been the idea of telling everyone that they're going to hell. Now, if you lock yourself into this book, then you believe in hell and you basically condemn yourself to hell because you're living in it and you're going to it because there's just no way to really avoid it. The way people throw it out, like, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. Well, we all going to hell then. Because there's no real answer. And I was telling Terry the other day, like the whole idea that if this is my book and this is really how the story goes, this is the most depressing shit I've ever seen because I'm here suffering. There really is no relief from the suffering because there's no way to know where I'm going or what's going to happen to me. And then I have to give up this whole life of enjoyment and suffer and feel guilty and be manipulated and be controlled and basically live my life as a slave so that one day I might make it to heaven, but really not quite sure. Then there's the idea of the contradictions. Because if you get a book that says this, there's always another book that says that. And okay, well, why can't we come online with one book, one idea, and one church? The idea that there's so many churches, it's almost like God would have to have compassion on you and give you a break because you have too many choices. So how can you condemn me on something that it'll be impossible for me to know? So I know I said a lot, but Terry, what I wanted to ask, well, Terry had a question about one particular book and wanted to know if you had heard of that book.
Have you heard of the Slave Bible?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Yeah, I was reading about it the other day and I was telling Erica about it. So if you could elaborate, what are your thoughts on what was presented
It
in that?
almost sounds like similar to what you're saying, because if people can't read and someone gives you a book and tells you what to
Right.
say, it almost sounds the same thing.
So one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have about the slave Bible is that they think that it was highly circulated in the Americas, but in truth, it really wasn't. So what you have is a situation that after 1804 is the Haitian Revolution. So this is when the Haitians threw off their shackles, threw off the religion of Christianity, went back to their orishas, and in the power of their orishas, they conquered the French Quebec, the Spanish, and became the first slave revolution to actually be successful and form their own nation. But this terrified the colonists, the European colonials in the Caribbean. So I forgot the author, but the Caribbean colonists wrote the slave Bible as a means of having control over the slaves in the Caribbean, because you got to realize economically, the Caribbean made way more money for Europe than what the 13 colonies made. Haiti alone made more money in sugarcane than what all 13 colonies made combined. So the control, they didn't want to see this happen again. They didn't want the slaves to go back to their orishas, so they realized we have to give them Christianity even more so than how the Americans do. And in doing that, they had to whittle it down, though. There were too many areas in the books that talk about coming out of slavery and being redeemed by God and getting your freedom. The 7 year of Jubilee and all those things had to be taken out. And everything had to be kept in there and emphasized that deals with slaves obey your masters as Jesus in the church and all that sort of. Your master is good or bad. You know, if a slave were to marry, you know, if a slave is beaten, and as long as he can rise in 2 days, then the masters to not be punished. So all those kinds of things had to be promoted. So that slave Bible was created, but first it was just circulating in the Caribbean. And then it started circulating up into what is today Florida, and then coming into Georgia. But by the time it gets into the United States, it's very late, and we're getting closer to the Civil War. So it never got the same type of circulation in the United States. In the United States, what they would do is just take the Bible and they would say, well, you can only teach slaves these parts. So they would cherry pick. So they pretty much cherry pick a version of the slave Bible in the Americas. But the actual slave Bible really didn't get into the Americas till right before the Civil War, and didn't have as much circulation. But that book was written to make sure the slaves do not revolt like they did in Haiti, because that was the most fearful thing that could have ever happened to Europe as far as they were concerned at that time frame.
You know, that I have to hit this history part because it's really confusing how it's a group of people. Really, are they really free, or is it that I won't treat you the same as I treat these? Like, there's a way where you can be a slave, but you can think you're free. And if you don't know that you're still a slave, I'm okay with that as long as I know I can get this work done, right? So I can allow you to live on your own and think that you're free. Because Haiti, it took 100 years for them to pay off their debt, right?
Yeah.
So how are you saying that you're free if you had to give me $100 million to be free?
Right.
That's not, to me, that's not free. If I kicked your ass and kicked you off my property, I shouldn't be giving you any money. But if I'm still paying you, basically you're paying reparations for your own freedom.
Yeah, pretty much. It is the only time in history that has happened to that degree. Well, actually, it is one of the
United States freedom from the pilot from England, right? Because how does America become free? But then you still borrowing money. Like there's still some things going on. Like we still.
I mean, yeah, we're still a corporation under under England. America is really a corporation. It's not actually a country.
Right.
It's a corporation under England, but there are.
And that new bill of sale is that birth certificate. That's your bill of sale. Right. So yeah. Sorry, I had to do that. I get real hyped. So
yeah, we don't pay people. Haiti is like Haiti was the first time that a revolution happened, and then you have to pay for your revolution. They had to they couldn't make Haiti an example physically through war, and they didn't want to continue the war. But the Haitians didn't want to continue the war either. So it was an agreement, and the Haitians took that agreement thinking that they were still going to sell so much sugar cane that they were going to come out of it still on top. But that was a miscalculation.
Blackball, right? Basically, yeah, blackball.
And they went ahead and they started paying it. Now, recently, Haiti is saying we want our money back from France, because what other nation has had to do that? Now, this is also something that they did to the African colonies when they gained their freedom, when they gained their so-called freedoms. Like all of the French nations in Africa, their gold reserves still has to be held in France. So in order for them to get their own money, the government to get their own money, they have to take a loan from their reserves in France. Thankfully, those, Senegal, Ivory Coast, they are organizing and saying right now, we're not doing that. Give us our stuff back. Give us our money. We're not going to honor this agreement of you get to be independent as long as we hold your money, because you're not independent. You're not functioning as a sovereign nation. So that same kind of thing was done to Haiti. We will keep throwing war at you unless you agree to pay the French Quebec and France this money that they would have made if we kept you as a colony. But you can't understand the politics of it all, which is you can't allow for this revolution to be too successful, because if this revolution spreads, then where does that leave the European? Because the world is people of color. Europe is controlling the world. And if we allow the world to have control of their resources, to be able to trade on the free open market, that leaves Europe, in the worst situation, especially at that time frame, because the vastness of America hasn't been explored yet. The land of Europe doesn't produce any natural resource or gold mines or silver mines. There's nothing there that has like high value.
No food.
The rest of the world.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any kind of value, but you need to stay competitive, then you have to control the rest of the world. You have to control other people's resources. So that was the mindset. We can't let the Haitian Revolution become a wildfire, because then everything we've created in Europe goes away. We no longer hold that power. So all of that had to be shut down.
Because you said that, I just wanted to point out one thing that I learned was that like when South Africa goes through apartheid, I was just wondering what happened to South Africa. But I didn't know that any infrastructure that was already built, they tore it up when they left. So it's like, okay, well, if I can't have you, no one can. Let me fuck it up, and now I'm gonna leave. So they tear apart the railroads, they tear apart the stuff. And so you're kind of looking at Africa like, why do you need to take loans from China right now to try to rebuild? But it's because everything that you made me a slave and I built these things. And then when you couldn't run me anymore, you tore it all apart. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
It's economics.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I mean, you get Africa right now is still has the most amount of resources than any other place in the world. And you have this leadership in Africa and that's just really funny. I saw an African dude wearing a MAGA hat, right? And I was like, why are they wearing MAGA hats? But it said, make Africa great again.
Oh, wow.
So, but that's the mindset of a lot of the, especially the new leadership of over the last 20 years of Africa, is Africa for Africans and the diaspora. So they've been building more independently. And if America had this mindset that we only want to help you if we can control you, whereas China and Russia has been saying we just want to make some money off of it. We'll give you the loans. You go and do the projects. Y'all take over the projects. You make the money off the project. Just pay us our loan plus interest. Like China has given loans for over 134 different projects, major projects in Africa. 24 of them complete failures. The rest of them, they've either been very successful or they are coming online or they've been okay. But the diversity of the investment has made China a lot of money. So they've never foreclosed on any of the 24 that were a disaster because they're making so much money on the other end, right? You know, just a diversified account. That's China's outlook on it. But of course, American propaganda paints it as China's trying to control Africa. Wow. And oddly enough, it got Black people in America thinking like, oh, they need to stay away from China. They need to stay away from China and Russia. It's like, no. If you need some work done at your house and the people in your house won't help you, then but the people across the street, they willing to give me a loan on a fair deal, I'm going with the fair deal. I'm not going with the person in my house trying to tell me how, okay, I'm gonna give you some money. And I know that the pipes are leaking in the ceiling, but you got to use this money, you know, to go buy some bread, to go buy some medicine. No, we need to fix the pipe. And that's what China's just like, I don't care what you want to do your infrastructure, fine. But America said, no, we'll give you $55 billion over the next 3 years, but you have to use that for medicine. You have to use that for schools. You have to use that for.
So you got to give the money back to Bill Gates. Oh, it's money laundering. Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, they want to tell them what they can do. And then you got to make these laws.
That's money laundering. That's money laundering because you're in control of the companies that I want you to use to get these things done. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's why the African nation has been going to China and Russia, because they're not trying to control what they do. They're just saying, we want to be business partners. And I don't blame them for it. And you know, Haiti a couple of years ago joined the African Union, the first Caribbean country to join the African Union. So I suspect that within the next 20 to 30 years, a lot of change will happen in Haiti.
This is really making a lot of other pictures come together. It almost like the disruption in Egypt with these things going on with, we're Black. No, we're not Black. Like, it's like, why are you all of a sudden triggered? Especially when you don't even care about the monuments. Like, overall, like, those are people who don't worship ISIS. Like, why are you worried kind of now about this new little thing? And I'm not going to give it airtime about the new incidents with that movie. But what I noticed when I was doing some research was that since from 1946 to 2016, the United States has given Israel $243 billion. The next person they give the highest amount is Egypt, $143 billion. That's like, why are they giving them that much money? And then next is Afghanistan, Vietnam, Iraq, Korea. So that states level of control. If I'm giving you this money for your army or your military, then I actually control your military. So, but I don't see any of these African countries that you're talking about on there. Terry, yeah, we're not giving you no money, but we're not giving Haiti no money. But then since I said Haiti, and since we did hit on that, I will say this. I think the most disturbing thing that I do see right now is that there's over 200 celebrities that have charities in Haiti, but I've never seen one person who said, I graduated college because of the Clinton Foundation or any of these people. You know, it's like, where does this so-called money go? What kind of help are they giving to Haiti if over 200 people who are like the richest people in the world are giving all this money to Haiti, but yet Haiti's not prospering, with their people. People still having to send barrels right now. So but anyway.
Just with Haiti, I understand that Haiti has one of the richest iridium deposits in the world, which makes it very rich. And so the question is who wants to control what?
So there's that. And then the mines are being leased, right? So we're not even gonna get into who that is, because that's one really creepy lady whose husband used to be president, and their family has been leasing the mines over there, right? These people, like, to understand that I could grow rice, but it's cheaper for me to get my rice from Mexico. Like, that's a huge problem. But anyway, we went into economics and we went away from.
My apologies.
Really? No, it's a part of the whole thing, because this religion is tied to economics. I'm going to make a book about please be happy and take your chance being miserable on earth and look for heaven later, and suffer now, stay a slave, because it's better to be a slave and to be poor than it is to be rich, because you can worry about heaven later. And that's some nonsense. You know what I'm saying? It's some nonsense. It's very convenient, because the most rich people, go to church and they do like whatever they want. And I always notice this too, like the guys in the little white shirts on the little bicycles, like they're always coming to poor people. It's like, you're supposed to be trying to save that guy, the rich guy, right? Going through the eye of the needle. That's who you're supposed to be. Why are you knocking on my door on Saturday? Stop. I never met a rich Jehovah's Witness either. But anyway.
I just wanted to say I'm from Canada, right? But what happened was the government created missionaries to go into these countries to Christianize them. And so the native populations, whether they were in Canada or Africa, there were always missionaries coming forward to preach the word of God based on what? The political agenda of the people in control, whether it was England or France or the Dutch or the Germans or whatever, but it was all based on the religious beliefs being brought to those people to colonize them through religion. So that's been their ploy all along, using the religion to bring forward their desire for control.
Oh, most assuredly. When you're fighting a war against someone, process, it's a three-pronged attack. You have the physical military attack. You have the business side of your country for the economic attack. And then you bring in the conquering of their mind, and that is through the religion. Ever since Emperor Theodosius of Rome in 482 commanded that all of Rome must be Christian, that instituted a mindset that we can control people easier if we control their religion. You don't have to have as large of a standing army. We don't have to involve as much business enterprise if we can control people through religion. So after that, once the Roman Empire broke up, it was realized that instead of how Rome originally used to allow people to have their own religion, now we must go in and conquer their religion as well. So like when the British, the East Indian Tea Company came into India, they brought missionaries with them. And they had those missionaries study the Hindu religion, the Buddhist religion, and they actually convinced the Hindu people that they were polytheistic. Prior to that, the Hindu religion actually is monotheistic in that Brahman is the only god, but all other deities are just aspects of Brahman. They convinced them that they were polytheistic, and they convinced them of Christianity. And then the East Indian Tea Company beat the shit out of them and took their their resources. It's the first time that a company conquered a country. But
some tea though. What's with the tea? Why is tea so powerful? The Boston Tea Party, the British Tea Company.
Got some tea right here. But they, I mean, that's when you can conquer the other group's religion and you can conform them into your religion. And your religion teaches that if I go in and conquer a foreigner, or if a foreigner lives among me, I can take that foreigner as a slave and keep them and pass them down to the next generation. If I can get the people that I'm conquering to believe that, then they will understand why they're in slavery, and they will be happy to be in slavery to a certain extent.
Therefore, each group that gets conquered assumes that they must be the chosen people that are suffering. And so they take on the identity of the people in the book.
Yes.
Because that ain't me. I'm not doing it. I'm done.
It kills me when those Power Rangers try to capture me on the side of the street, them Hebrew Israelites. I call them Power Rangers because when they had that in their little purple outfit, they look like Power Rangers. So when I see the Power Rangers, I try to avoid it, but every now and then they catch me, and I'm not one to back down from an intellectual debate. But they are so desperate. If you look at, well, let me rephrase. If you look at the demographics of the majority of them, they are people who have come out of some type of suffering situation, whether it's economics or it's jail or something of that nature, and they've attached themselves to this religion that says that, hey, the 400 years are over or about to be over, and now we are going to be supreme because we are God's chosen. And you can show them how their information is off, how it doesn't, like that Deuteronomy 20, I think it's 23:68 or 28:63, something like that, where it says that, you know, the children of Israel will sail away on ships and be sold for 400 years, and that's what they hinged everything on that. But that actually says that they will be taken to Egypt, but they say Egypt is bondage, but they will desire to sell themselves and they will find no buyers. When my ancestors came to America, there were plenty of buyers, and we didn't freely individually sell ourselves. That passage talks about you freely individually sell yourself, not somebody, another group conquers you and then they sell you. I'm in such a dire strait that I'm selling myself to the Americans for this 400 years of bondage slavery. No, it doesn't work that way. But they try to make that fit into their into their ideas. But it's all coming out of a desperation to feel relevant. And their attachment to this Bible, because that's what they grew up with for the most part. And they want to stay attached to it, but they need to conform it to fit them. They're not doing anything differently than what the Europeans did when they took a book from the Levant that was talking about a Mesopotamian people, that was for a Mesopotamian people, and they conformed it to themselves. And the Africans have conformed to themselves, and the Asians, and so on and so forth.
So I'm going to put up the list of books because I was listening to what Billy Carson said about the list of the books, and you've already listed the Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I'm going to put up the list of the books. And you've read some of these books or studied a little about some of these, right?
Yep, every last one of them.
Holy cow. So the idea is with this is that you're taking different books from different times and different religions, and you're really trying to sew up this really nice fabric to summarize, this is what life is about. This is, but then they're leaving out, the other stuff, which is like the book of Adam, the book of the giants, the book of Enoch, because as the young lady said in the comments, we can't leave out the aliens. So this is why Christianity and Islam is, they're gonna always tell the story that fits their narrative. So I gotta limit it to 4,000 years. I gotta limit it to the kind of people that are on Earth, when we know that mermaids and giants and Anunnaki and all these things existed that people weren't necessarily with the Tower of Babel. I don't really think that was about language. I think that was them trying to get up to the gods and be like, what the freak, you're abandoning us. And we're pissed off about it. And we're trying to come up, trying to make some things happen. And so it's like, no, these little fools, they coming up here. Bam, we got to get them back down.
Actually, can I give you a little bit more about that one?
Of course you can. That's why you're here.
Oh, Council Nicaea. But so when you look at the Tower of Babel story from the Sumerian perspective, right, from the Atrahasis, what you actually have is what you have according to their story is Marduk and Enlil are in battle against each other. Babylon is a city, Marduk is a city of Marduk. Marduk's dad is Enki. So Marduk is built, the Tower of Babel, in the short version, the Tower of Babel was his communications tower to be able to speak to all his forces that were fighting against Enlil, right? It's two different versions, so let me tell you both. So the one version is that it's Marduk's communication tower to be able to fight against Enlil, and so Enlil attacked it with a missile, basically, is what it comes down to. Attacked it with a missile to destroy the tower. And by destroying that tower, it allowed for Enlil to make great advances, because without being able to communicate to your troops and your supply lines, it's more difficult to win the fight. So that's one version of the Sumerian story that talks about this. Now, understand the Sumerian story spans about 3,000 to 4,000 years of storytelling. So of course, there are going to be different versions of every story. In another version of the story that just fell right out of my head. In another version of the story, the Tower of Babel was built prior to the Enlil-Marduk war. And when the first person who came to Earth, which was Lamu, when Lamu first came to Earth and found gold in the land, and because he couldn't be king because he got beat up by Anu, so Anu became king of Nibiru. He supposedly took all the nuclear missiles from Nibiru, and when he got there, he built the tower, and the tower was a launching pad to be able to shoot missiles at Nibiru when it came back into Earth's atmosphere. But Enki comes down, Enki kicks Lamu's butt and takes the missiles, and then takes the missiles down to the Apsu and hides them, and so on and so forth. So there's two different versions of the Tower of Babel from the Sumerian perspective, which when the Northern Israelite kingdom was in captivity in Babylon in 584 BC, they would have learned this story, and they would have gained that understanding of that story from the Sumerian perspective. And you have to recognize the book of Genesis was not written until after they came out of Babylonian captivity. So they had learned the Sumerian, the Akkadian, the Assyrian, the Babylonian versions of these stories. And then when they came out of that captivity, their books went from Job on. They didn't have Genesis and Deuteronomy and all of that. So then under, I believe, Hezekiah or Josiah, they then rearranged those stories to make them a Genesis story. And so the Tower of Babel got switched around as to be something dealing with languages. But the closest language connection would be Marduk using it as a communications tower to speak to all his people. Communication tower is gone. Now he can't speak to all his people. If you can't speak to your people during a time of war, you will lose tremendously, because you don't know what the other forces are doing. You can't call in for backup. You understand as an army personnel how that works.
It's so interesting. What movie is that where the Babel fish goes in the air to help people communicate? Galaxy. It's not Guardians of the Galaxy. It's the other.
Fish goes in the air to help you communicate.
Hitchhiker's Guide.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and there's this thing called the Babel fish.
Right. Yeah.
And once they used the Babel fish to prove that God exists, God said, well, my existence is based on faith. So if you actually can confirm that I exist and you no longer have faith, then therefore you prove that God doesn't exist. It's interesting. You gotta check that out. But I'm gonna give a shout out, Alley Cat. It's so good. You're so supportive. I'm so glad that you're here. Jermaine or Jadu, Renee, thank you. We met you hanging out with Apollo. And then my model friend over here, Kate Scorpio, and our admin, Brandy, the best galactic star chart reader there is. She's coming out with some new designs. I'm really looking forward to getting my poster. It's beautiful. And I did show it to Terry. She saw it. But Terry, I think you had something that you wanted to say. Meanwhile, you had a question or? I don't know. Oh my God.
Terry's still muted.
Oh.
You're muted, Terry.
Me personally, I'm being bullied by a cat. So, Terry, you're under mute.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, isn't it interesting how history can be manipulated by the people who want it to tell their story their way, right?
Right. And telling you a part of the truth,
Yeah.
but not all the truth.
And then putting it into a book and say, this is the word of God. Who says so? The people who wrote the book.
Terry, be careful because you're going to hell. So, yeah, you're gonna. And it's so funny too because people are so quick to say. But I like the fact that you mentioned earlier that you were taught how to study. Etymology is so important because we misuse words and we communicate very poorly. And now that we're especially communicating with people overseas and people in different countries, people in demographics, you know, a person in Atlanta uses different words than a person from Florida, and we can easily miscommunicate because what we're doing is adapting and changing words constantly. Like to the point, there's a particular word that people use. They've used it wrong so much that they actually begin to add the wrong word into the Bible. I mean, not into the Bible, into the dictionary. And so people just think it's okay to use these words. They don't really understand that the translation from, you know, Latin to whatever words into English, we just really have a poor understanding of language. And so for you, you know, mentioning even too that the ministers are preaching, but not being able to read well or read at all, they can't go compare the languages. Even those correspondent books, is it correspondence or correspondence Bibles? That's still not even a deep enough translation of those words.
And Strong's is horrible.
Yeah.
Strong's is the worst one. I would never use Strong's. I don't even use those books anymore, but the Strong's one was a horrible one. I wound up having to throw that one away when I was in my 20s because it misinterpreted so much from Paleo Hebrew and Aramaic, and it was just completely off. So I had to throw that one away even when I was still struggling between the two, in which direction path I was going. But yeah, you have to be able to dive deeper into these things and learn where these words come from, like and where and how they've been used over years. Something simple in the English language. If I told you that today was awful, what is your response to that? What do you think? How do you think my day was?
Wow.
Was it good or was it bad? I'm asking. Was it good or was it bad? If I said I had an awful day, what does that mean to you?
Wow.
Does it mean I had
It could have been a day full of awe, or it could have been a day that was terrible. That right. I never even noticed it with that word. My goodness.
But 500 years, I mean, a couple of 100 years ago, 500 years ago, if I said I had an awful day, everybody understood that it meant I had a day full of awe. It was
Oh
a
my
wow
goodness.
kind of day. But today, if I said I had an awful day, 90% of the people are going to automatically go to, you had a bad day. It wasn't a good day. So people don't understand. You got to get into the actual words. When they read that, you know, in the beginning, there was chaos in the waters. That word tahom, that's right there. That means chaos in the waters, is the Akkadian word for Tiamat, right? And Tiamat was the woman goddess that from the earth was created in the Babylonian story, the Akkadian and Babylonian story. So you have to recognize that gives you even more understanding that they took from the Sumerians, and I just like using Sumerians to encapsulate everybody from Sumerians all the way down to the Babylonians, because all of them tell the same story, just use different names. Well, tell similar stories, just use different names. But that Tiamat character is something they pulled from another group. So it's not their original story. And the biggest reason why they created that story of Genesis is because for the people of that time frame, if your house of your God was destroyed, then that meant that your God lost the battle and your God was weaker than the other person's God. Because the same word that means temple also means house. So it can mean house for a regular person. But if I was saying this is the temple of God, or this is, and I would use the same word, say this is the temple of Erika, this is the temple of Terry, meaning your physical house. After the Babylonian captivity, they realized they had to take away from the idea that this God exists in a house, that the universe is this God's house. So therefore, if the universe is this God's house, then no other God can defeat my God by destroying the physical house.
You have to ask for help.
So by doing that, they had to change that narrative, but they still have those words are in there. And they also had to change the narrative that man was put on earth by some level of divinity and not put on earth to be the Anunnaki slaves or to become some inconsequential being of labor for the Egyptians, that we were here because God deemed us, and that's why we're made in the image of. Now, I will say, I like that version better than the slave version of the Anunnaki and the Kemetic, but they borrowed it and then they did make it their own. That is what, and sometimes I will say, that's why on my podcast, I always say that there are some things that we can take where you can see an evolution of philosophy from a even older style of thinking of man was put on the planet for the slavery of the Anunnaki to the Hebrew, man was put on the planet in the image of the creator to have dominion over the earth. Right? So I can see an evolution of philosophy there, but it was all still propaganda based on making sure that the next time that they're defeated, no one can claim their God was defeated. And then they went on.
It's also a convenient marketing because I can market myself as the ones with dominion, and I'm gonna market you as the slave. So this is the great marketing too. As long as I have power, I'm gonna preach in my church. We got it, God. You know, we're the ones, we're the chosen ones on this aspect, and then on the other aspect, I'm gonna teach, poverty mindset.
That's when they throw that chosen one thing in there. I mean, what kind of divinity would say, I got 3 kids, you my favorite. You 2 other ones, I'm just gonna graft y'all in, y'all be all right, but you better act like the first one. Otherwise, I'm gonna kick y'all to the curb as well.
No, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna drown your ass. I'm gonna drown you.
So my question now is, okay, we're going back to the Sumerian, but how about the Atlantean times? How about history from 50,000 years ago? You know, like we're talking about trying to put everything into with the Anunnaki and stuff, but they weren't here necessarily 50,000 years ago. What went on in that time frame to where we are now in that, you know, the last 10,000 years, there's this control, but what was going on before that? And so it's conveniently not
There you
put
go.
into
That's
our
the word,
history, you
convenient.
know, and then people try, they pull stuff out about Atlantis, and they're trying to say this and this and this, but there's a whole blank period that we really don't know anything about, and it's controlled information, and they're putting it into control, saying that, oh, the Anunnaki created humans. But no, humans were here before the Anunnaki came. They came here after, and they wanted to take control. But well, what about the past? And so there's so many questions that if you really start thinking, we haven't got answers to them.
You got to let me say my line.
Okay.
And you know what my line is? My line is this. There's people trying to claim their royal bloodline because they're a part of the Anunnaki, and people want to claim Anunnaki. We got molested by the babysitter, y'all. Okay. Some people were sitting around, you know, they were here to do what they were supposed to do, and we got molested. And you're claiming, oh, I'm proud of this, whatever. I've been trying to figure out how to get away from anything that belongs to this, because that I don't want any part of. That's a part of all the bloodline wars going on, is this group of people right here, and this constant battle to hit this bloodline against that bloodline, and these people are better than those people. When if you really wanted to be a truly spiritual person, you will go straight to source. I don't need to go to Enki and Enlil for nothing. Source creator came down here, you know, or however formed us, right? And there's a whole nother story that people aren't talking about, but people are really excited about these basically pedophiles who, I mean, what else do you call that? Man, y'all was mating with the fish, with the goat, with the chickens. I mean, they was putting semen everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, this is how all these weird things, these anomalies come, where these things are in our environment that have to be destroyed because they're causing chaos and wreaking havoc on the planet. But here it is. People really want to be a part of that. You know, they're Black and they want to be Anunnaki, white want to be Anunnaki, and they're royal. And yeah, you do have the DNA. We got DNA, all this different kinds of DNA in us, and that's fabulous. But I just think people need to bring it on back to reality, that before this, what was? And it's really convenient because I want to pick this, cherry pick, like you say, this little point in time, so I can claim this thing or use this book. And you're right. And it has a lot of good principles in it. Why? Because it's been stolen from all these different places, you know, that this is something that existed far before. And I always found it interesting too, especially because being a person who went to Kingdom Hall, I always wondered how you can start your religion in 1890 and then tell everybody else that they're going to hell. And then I used to ask this question also, well, what church did Jesus go to? What book was he teaching from, if any? And what were his teachings? So you're getting this book and you make it after he dies and say, no, this is the book that he was teaching, but that's not true at all, right?
No, it couldn't have been true, because at the time frame, there was no, the Torah was still open. It hadn't been closed yet. So if he existed, he wouldn't have been teaching from a canonized Torah, because it wasn't closed. The Torah was closed between the 4th and 6th century AD, Common Era, CE. So he couldn't have been teaching that. It would have been a multitude of scrolls that were around. So you have no idea what he was, if he was around, where he would have been teaching. I love the fact that Terry brought up the prior to 10,000 years ago, because I have two trains of thought on that. According to the Sumerian story, they say that the Anunnaki have been around for 250,000 years. They have been on Earth, but they used to use the Agigi to do all the slave labor. It wasn't until around that 10,000. It wasn't using slave labor, but at some point after like 150,000 years, that's when they supposedly created man, and then they started doing all that stuff. And then Enlil got tired of man, and he flooded man out around 10,000 years ago. And their civilization was restarted. But when it was restarted, Anu was like, I'm tired of y'all fighting Tired of y'all being kings over these humans. So we're going to establish a human royal bloodline. So whatever humans got the most Anunnaki blood, they're going to be the ones in charge, and we're going to be in the background. So the Sumerians have created a story that exists longer than, of existence longer than 10,000 years ago. But I still have an issue with the idea of Anunnaki, because the same situation can be explained as far as the restart of civilization after the Younger Dryas period. Notice that all these people who have these flood stories and startup stories, it all happens 10,000 years ago, which is exactly when the Younger Dryas, which was the last ice age, ended. And the ice melted very rapidly in 6 days, pretty much. And it raised sea levels by 400 feet. A 400 feet rising of sea levels would create tidal waves and, tsunamis all across the world for the most part. Some islands that existed would cease to exist, which explains the continent of Mu, as well as Atlantis sinking into the ocean. So if you look at it from that scientific perspective, if there was an ice age and all this stuff flooded, the idea is that the thought process with these people's stories is that there were civilizations before that, civilizations that were more advanced. The stories of Mu and the stories of Atlantis is this advanced civilization, but even the most advanced civilization will not be able to defeat nature. Nature will always win. The pyramids are older than Khufu. The Sphinx is older than 8,000 years ago. The Sphinx is more around 50,000 years ago, with the water weathering that John Anthony West proved to the Sphinx. And we know that the Sahara Desert goes through cycles of green to desert, and it happens around every 13 to 15,000 years. It rotates. It is more of my perspective that there were civilizations, and then the few people that did survive those civilizations, when they went out into the world again 1,000 years later to try to reestablish their civilization, they saw people who had reverted back to a hunter-gatherer status. And in that hunter-gatherer status, they came in and said, hey, Sumerians, let me show you farming. And that's why all of a sudden Sumeria just exploded with farming and agriculture in around 8,000 years ago. And if you've ever been out at sea, like when I went out at sea with the Navy, when you see another ship coming, you ain't got to go out to sea, you can just be on a beach. And when you see a ship coming in from the ocean, it looks like it's descending from the heavens. This is why the Aztecs, they thought Cortez was the return of the feathered serpent, because he looked like he was coming out of the heavens as you watch a ship come from the horizon. So if it appears that way through an optical illusion, from heaven to earth they came. So the Anunnaki, from heaven to earth they came. If I saw somebody coming across the ocean, they're descending from the heavens. They're not on a boat, they're descending. But the Bible, have you ever read Eric von Däniken's book, Chariot of the Gods? He expressed multiple times how many of these stories give the appearance of an alien ship or some type of higher developed technology. But I can't give it to aliens all the time, because when it talks about God descending on Mount Sinai with fire and smoke and rumbling and trembling of the earth, it sounds like a spaceship landing. It sounds like a ship that's landing that uses fossil fuel propulsion. You're not traveling space with fossil fuel propulsion. You know how it would take just to get to Pluto. It would take you it would take lifetimes to travel just that distance. But they're going around Earth, and all of them got this fire coming out. It is an advanced civilization that was here before the Younger Dryas, got almost wiped out by the Younger Dryas, realized that they can now make themselves to be kings over these people, and because they had less knowledge, and they did. That's all. So we've existed, but through different plate shifts. What is it when the North Pole, South Pole switches around? Through all those different kinds of natural disasters, civilizations have had to be restarted. And unfortunately, the majority of that information, if it happened right now, if we had an ice age, 2,000 years later, none of this stuff that we've built is going to exist. We're not going to be here. And whatever group of people survive, they will make up myths and stories about who was there before.
That's right. And I'm going to be the biggest and the bestest. Then I'm going to take Terry with me, and I'm going to be like, me and my friends was in charge, and I'm going to build some statues, make some t-shirts, and that's what people are going to believe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And especially in the way we build things today, most of this stuff won't survive.
Nah.
The Sphinx and the pyramids and all the other pyramids around the world, they survive because they were built out of earthen material. This stuff we build out of steel and concrete, it wouldn't survive. Remember that movie 2012? None of our stuff is going to survive something like that. It's going to take something that's really rooted in the earth to survive.
And it's really, really a lot of ego-based, because I can't let these things exist for a certain amount of time because it will debunk my own religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's people who they're just not going to include the fact that there's things going on other planets, that there's mythical creatures, there's that there are like fish beings and all these things, because it's not in my book. And I can't tell you, anything about reincarnation or anything like that, because then if I give you an out that says you don't have to be good this time, that you can actually fuck it up and start over again, now you won't follow the book, right? Because the book says, nope, this is the only time. You better get it right now, or else I'm going to spank you. Or you're going to hell, or I'm gonna drown you. So, I have to make it so that you can't escape these consequences, and I gotta threaten you. That's what you do when little kids, when you have kids, right? You're like, you better go to bed. You make up some reason for them to be scared.
Or worse, you end up in purgatory and you have to repeat the
Holy
same day
cow.
over again.
But then we know what that's about, because I need you to pay penance to get your family out of purgatory, right? So I can get them. I wondered about people who were in my classes. If you heard that people paid to get out of purgatory, that told you right there that everything that we were messing with had to be nonsense, because it was based on money.
It is, but that fear of hell will win. It is very strong. That fear of hell is incredibly strong to people. And even the fear of living here again, because most people live a suffering life. Most people, the idea of even repeating this life is too traumatic for most people to be able to comprehend and deal with. You would think Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, will have more power, and more people will be willing to go through it, because then it's like, okay, I don't have to be perfect, but as long as I get to a point of understanding the power of my mind, I can ascend to and when I'm going through samsara, I can ascend and become one with the all, one with the universe. But if I don't, I'm not going to go into some type of hell. I'm just going to come back, and then hopefully I can get it the second time, or the third time, or the 10,000th.
It might seem good, but it might not seem so good to the people that are promised into the priesthood as small children, told that they're not supposed to have sex, but then some things happen to them while they're there, when they're surrounded by adult males.
Yeah, you don't want to come back.
That you're like, you know what? Because they use that excuse for the children's suffering, that this is a part of your karma, right? So if this is happening to you, if you're being abused in any way, if you're getting hurt or suffering in any way, this is just a part of it. And I have met people in other countries where they were, when I would talk about joy or happiness, that they say, oh, you're not supposed to really be happy. They really believe, like, you can really tell the mindset of a population, because if they don't believe that they're supposed to be happy, they believe that suffering is just normal.
Right.
And yeah, they've been sufficiently washed and dried, you know?
That's why I like Tibetan Buddhism better than the Indian Buddhism.
Yeah.
But Tibetan Buddhism doesn't go so hardcore into you have to satisfy your dharma, that you have this dharma because of something negative that you did in your previous lives. I got a customer real quick. Y'all go ahead and talk.
Here I am saying, go ahead. Thierry, any of your thoughts or anything? Because this was great, because I think, we took a class the other day on, the RH negatives, but this is the other half, which is the RH positives, the people who were normal. like they needed that book, because they needed those books to tell them how to behave, because they didn't know how to behave. Like, people were already like in a state of peace, and these people came, I feel like that's how I feel, that another groups of people came down and being disruptive, making noise. We over here just trying to go swimming, so I really don't know, but.
Yeah, I think that's just, it opens up our minds to start to question, like, what is the narrative we've been told? And, it's for each of us to sort of like start questioning this stuff, because it is, history is written by the people who have taken control, right? So there's so much information that has been hidden from us. And what is the narrative that they've wanted us to understand? And I guess it's all about, like, finding the answers within, instead of going out and checking to see what people are telling us that we have to believe. We want to see our history as, the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, or the last 25,000 years, but we're told that the universe, and that the earth is 4 billion years old. What happened 1 billion years ago? What happened 300 million years ago? Did those aspects from 300 million years ago move forward? And so there's questions that we have to just stop and ask ourselves, but take the time to think.
We abandoned you. My neighbor, the church right next door, I live on one street. In between these two streets, I live behind a mosque, a church, another church, another church, another church, another church. Like, in this little one block, there's 11 or 12 churches.
Wow. That's a lot.
And I don't dislike people for going. I actually admire a lot of people that are practicing like Islam or going to church, when I see their heart is that they want to be good. I mean, I saw this book called Fuck Jesus, and I was like, that's too much. We don't need to do all that, like, let people go through their cycle. Like, you had this cycle of learning, and then you learn beyond that, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, it became antiquated. But for some people, they need this, right?
They do. And that's why on my channel, I always tell people I'm not trying to convert anybody or pull anybody away from their religion. If being in your religion keeps you from raping my daughters or murdering my son or stealing from, stay with your religion. However, whatever keeps you as a moral being, stay there. Now, if your religion is not keeping you as a moral being, you need to go find something different. Or if it's just not connecting with you, then come talk to me. Then come look at the videos and be a part of the podcast and that sort of. But I never want to convert anybody. If it makes you happy to be that, then stay there. Now, just because I believe that you're gonna come back and and try it again because you ain't figured it out, I'm not forcing that on you. That's just what I think. That's just what I've hypothesized. based on the information that I have been able to gather. But beyond that, do your thing, do you. Because now they do interrupt me. I'm sorry. It was Ramadan, and police is blocking the street to get to my house and all this kind of stuff to let them out if I get home a certain time. It's inconvenience. But other than that, I'm surrounded by Muslims where I live. But they're good people, they're nice people. They only parked in my grass last year. They didn't park in my grass this year. So they're good to go. I like them. But they're good. And as long as people are doing that, people can realize that everybody's entitled to their own belief system. And yeah, we may disagree, and I may deconstruct Christianity because that was the one I grew up in. I'm not deconstructing it to try to convert someone. I'm deconstructing it for people who have decided that they wanted to walk away from it. And I'm not targeting you. I'm not coming to your church and telling you that you're wrong. I'm not going on their podcast and their sermons and telling them that they're wrong and yelling at them and telling them that you're going to hell and all these other sorts of things. But they seem to be offended even if you just speak against it. Just the mere fact of you speaking against it, they get into their feelings about it. And some of them get into their feelings because they need everybody else to agree with them in order to validate their own insecurities about their religion. And that really just speaks to the person, but they're scapegoating people who disagree with them in order for them to feel better and not have to face their own questions and their own challenges, which is something that they really should look deeper into themselves, because maybe you're not connecting the way you think you are. You're just repeating what you've seen. You're imitating what you've seen and thinking that that imitation will get you there. Whereas your own book tells you that many will call my name, but I won't know them jokers.
Well, this is another thing too, like psychologically, this would be like telling me that there's a sinkhole underneath my house and at any moment it could grow bigger and my house is going to drop below it. And the fact that people need this stability, what we have is this freedom that other people don't necessarily want. Kind of like how you say, a lot of people don't want to be business owners. They want to have a job because they know what they're going to do and they want to be told what to do. Where we're okay with not knowing everything can be a very uncomfortable feeling for people. They feel like they have to know everything. That's why they're going to argue with you, because I have to know this or else my whole world will fall apart. But I think if we're just proving to be bigger people, being bigger thinkers, that we're allowed to be flexible in our mind and to grow. And I'm actually okay if I leave this plane and go to another plane and I don't know everything. The biggest thing that they're trying to do is, I'm so afraid of what's going to happen after this life that I need someone to please tell me, tell me what's going to happen when I leave. Please tell me it's going to be okay. Please, it's like someone needing to tell you that. But then I also think too, like here people are, they're kind of sitting there on Sunday and Wednesday, and their curiosity levels are very low.
Yeah. Oh,
and sure. Is it bad that their curiosity level is low? That you're just not inspired, right? They're just not inspired. Where and it's like, can y'all just shut up with all them questions? Like they just, it just really gets on people's nerves, like you have too many questions. I just want to teach my class. If I've ever seen a teacher that is teaching a class, they can't answer the question. So that question is considered a disruption. Mm-hmm. And so we need to kick you out of this class and write.
I've been told that many times. I asked too many questions.
Miss Simmons.
I was told. That's why I was told many a time, don't question God. You should never question God.
Yeah.
Well, I can't question God if I don't agree that is God. If I don't agree that's God, then I'm not questioning God. I'm questioning what man think God is, who man think God is, who somebody 2,000 years ago thought God was, who somebody 4,000, 6,000 years ago thought God was. I'm questioning that.
But even still a contradiction, because Jacob wrestled with God.
Right, but yet no man sees the face of God. How you wrestle with somebody you ain't never seen, but nobody's ever seen God?
And got a broken hip afterwards. They had a tussle.
How does Abraham feed and clean the feet of God if nobody's ever seen the face of God?
In Taoism, when they say that you try to explain God, that isn't God, right? You can't
Wow.
you can't explain it. So yeah, the Tao Te Ching.
Right. The first thing in the Tao Te, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, but that's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, the first thing in the Tao Te Ching says that the way that
Translation.
can be named is no longer the way. The
Yeah.
way that can be put into a book is no longer the way.
Yeah.
It is no longer the creator. The moment you give it a name, the moment you put it into a book, the moment you try to define it, tells you that, the all is just like in the Kabbalion and the Tao agree that the all is undefinable, cannot be defined. A finite mind could never define an infinite mind. So the fact that we even attempt to is foolishness on our part, because it's not something we should attempt.
It sounds like putting the universe in a glass.
Right. And you inside the glass. How you gonna put the universe in a glass while you already inside the glass? You can't put it in a glass that you can't even be, that you're already inside of. But you're trying to create that, simulate that, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, you're trying to take your 3D mind to explain the infinite amount of infinity concept. I put this up because I like this guy from the fifth kind. He was a pastor, and he had to stop. And he started discussing on here the different meanings of the Elohim, how over time, or Yahweh, like that it was reinserted in certain chapters and certain books to recreate the stories. That's a good one to check out from the fifth kind. Why are we here? For anybody else that's watching, because he really goes deep into, them actually putting these names in after the fact. And that even the words, like at one point, Elohim is a group of people. It can be one person, one leader, one God, one group of gods. It can be the landlord. It could be the boss. It's like, it changes meaning. And that's why I really like etymology. And if we could just really study words, that word that they changed was irregardless. It used to be regardless of what happens. And so people kept saying irregardless so much that they put irregardless in the dictionary.
Irregardless is in the dictionary?
Oh, really? Yes. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir. We've been doing wrong shit all day.
I'm sure agreeance was probably in there too. I hate when people say agreeance. There's no such word as agreeance. Just agreement.
Or funnily. Funnily was never a word. Now I hear people say funnily all the time. It's like, what?
What is that, Terry?
What is funnily?
Funnily. Like, is it as it's funny? They use the word now funnily. And it's like, yes. That's not a word.
That's atrocious. Yes. That's atrocious.
It is.
Well, I think I hope we didn't beat the horse to death, but we did beat this horse. Like, were there any like really cool facts that you wanted to share, or did you get to say all that you would have wanted to say? Did we miss anything for you? No, you, Mr. Renz.
Oh, I mean, I'm just going with the flow of the conversation.
Okay, go with the flow.
Yeah, I always.
No epiphanies last night in the dreams?
Actually, I was awakened in the middle of my dream, and so I forgot what the dream was. And I've been trying to remember that dream so very much because when I dream some stuff. And there's usually some level of epiphany that comes out of it. But I can't remember the dream right now because somebody decided they wanted to call me in the middle of my dream.
I hope you got rewarded. I mean, if for your interruption. Anyway, that's me being funny. But anyway, you did your last stuff. Well, I guess you did something else the other day, but the last thing I saw that you did was exorcisms. How did that go? Any summations or did you get to go see the movie?
No, I haven't went to see the movie yet. most exorcism, you know, the primary movies that have made people get all into exorcism, and you see an increase in exorcism ever since the movie The Exorcist came out and The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Those movies came out and people really started believing more and more in exorcism today, like they used to back in the day. The thing about it is, the Robbie Hunkner, who is the boy that The Exorcist is based off of, before he died in 2020, he admitted that he faked it. He lied. He was just being rebellious to his overly dominating Christian mother. So all the stuff that movie came out of was a lie. The Emily Rose situation, unfortunately, you have a situation with a young girl who has schizophrenic epilepsy. Her medication wasn't working, but she was a devout Catholic girl. So since the medicine wasn't working, she made the assumption it was demons, and she pretty much starved herself to death. And her parents, alongside her parents and her priest, which the parents and the priest were convicted of negligence, but never went to prison for it. But she had a medical condition. And even the Pope's exorcist, that Pope in his book talks about the fact that less than 0.5% of people who call on him saying that they need an exorcism performed are all that he denies them, because he's saying you don't have demons in you. You know, so a lot of these people claim they got demons. He's like, no, you don't have demons. And then the last exorcism he performed failed. The person he didn't exorcise the demon. And then the person disappears. Like, they haven't been able to find this woman. And it's the only one that he ever allowed to be recorded, of this lady having him exorcising demon, but he failed in his attempt.
It must kill his faith. Like, this kill your own faith in what you do, because you see it doesn't work. But then I've also heard a lot of people go to theology school. I've met people that have gone to theology school. They don't even believe in God anyway, and they don't believe in the religion that they're being put into, like, as ministers. But then also, before you do any type of healing work on people, they have to choose that for themselves. So usually with an exorcism, it's your family calls, right? I have to call Terry to say, Terry, can you do some Reiki on me? Can you remove some stuff from me, right? Like, so if it's something that I want to change, I have to choose to change. So I was just thinking just now, like, that would be like the number one reason it wouldn't work, because if I don't want to change and I don't express the desire to change, then you can't come and throw water on me all you want. And I'm not going to change. I laughed in church once and they took me in the back. I just busted out laughing in the middle of church. My spirit was just like, let's just cause problems. And then I just felt even more ridiculous as these people were sitting there trying to talk a demon out of me. And I'm just like, what in the world? But I do understand how do you say charismatic?
Charismatic.
Needs to be charismatic, because if I chant Jesus, 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 and then I start clapping, and then you play the music, bum, 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 bum. Yeah, one day I lost my earrings, my hair bow, my shoes were on different sides of the room, and people had to tell me what happened, because that charismatic movement, that kind of music put together with a bunch of people who are in believing that this is what should or is going to happen, that you can get swept away in that and feel like you had some type of experience,
when really it was all just it was the God and goddess inside of you that was able to tap into a different frequency.
I think I was tapping into gratitude, because I could do this at home and just be, and I start saying thank you and being grateful for things around me. And then I start getting emotional and I feel just as good as if I went to church, y'all.
And it's all within you. Have you ever read Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil?
Yes. Love it.
Right. So he talks about how the devil is the negative portion of your brain, but then you also have the positive portion of your brain. Depending upon what frequency you're tapping into in your brain, that creates the emotional response to different environments. So if you believe hard enough in a demon or believe hard enough in an angel, then those are the things that you're going to start to experience. And when you experience those things, you know, people who are in religions are going to attribute it to that deity instead of recognizing that it is the spirit inside themselves, their own self, that's creating and manifesting these things. And the mind is so powerful that, you know, there are accounts of people dreaming that they hurt themselves and they actually wake up bruised, or their physical body responds to whatever they dreamed about, because that's how strong the mind is.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with blaming outside sources for all your problems, because now you just gave them the power to control you.
Exactly. Like I don't really get sick anymore, right? But I decide that I'm not going to be sick. I decided that my knee was going to stop hurting 2 months ago, and it stopped hurting after a few weeks. But I focused on it. Now, I'm not stupid either. I'm going to eat the right things to make sure that my body is physically getting the right nutrients and that sort of thing. But I also decide I'm not going to get sick. When COVID came out, and the lady I was with at the time frame, she had an upper respiratory, which was probably COVID. You know, she was like, "Oh, you're gonna get sick." I was like, I'm not getting sick. I don't eat all that meat that you eat. And plus, I'm telling this body what it's gonna do, and I'm not going to get sick. And I didn't leave the room. I didn't isolate her, any of those things. I even kissed on her. Still, I didn't get sick. I'm not gonna get sick. I decided that I'm not gonna do it. Now, I went to Vegas last summer, and they had all that gelato. And me and all that gelati, we got to know each other real well. And I know I put all that dairy in my system, and I know that it creates mucus. So I got a massive sinus infection a few days later. But I know that that's going to happen based on what I ate. It's not a demon that gave me a sinus infection. Now, when I was 15 and I was in church and I got my first sinus infection, the deacons and the pastors want to get around me, and they call themselves healing me. And, you know, Terry, I don't know how old you guys are, Terry and Erika, but back in them early 80s, them mid 80s, they didn't know what a sinus infection was. If you think about it, there was no such thing as a sinus infection prior to like 85 or 86. They would do spinal taps on people and all other things.
Dang.
They didn't know. But they was like, "Oh, you don't have enough faith. That's why you didn't get healed right then." Come to find out some time later, it was a sinus infection. I have allergies, towards dogwood trees, and which is crazy living in Georgia to have that issue, dogwoods. But the power of your mind is so incredibly strong that you manifest everything that happens to you to a certain degree. The law of cause and effect. Now, some people's causation can affect you, but when it comes to spiritual things, nobody's causation can affect you unless you're weak in maintaining your own spiritual strength. Which is why, when people I would love to see. I had a bunch of Christians in here one time, and I asked them. I showed them a picture of what an angel actually looks like according to the description of your Bible. And I said, if this walked in this door, would you run out the back door if it came through the front door? All of them said they'd be out. I said, but why? This is your angel. This is your wheel within a wheel with all the eyes. This is the four-headed monster, the four-headed angel. Why would you run? This is a good thing. And I don't know, I'm scared. That's terrifying. Because in their mind, anything that doesn't look like them or anything that they're familiar with here on heaven and here on earth, their minds have said that is terrifying, that is evil, that is something that I need to run from. Whereas my mind says, bruh, if that wheel within a wheel with all the eyes show up, I'm not running. Have a seat. I got some questions. I need some answers. Yeah, that thing. I want to know what the real deal is. Who are you really? That's what I want. I got questions to ask. Even when people, and I'm probably going to shoot the video. I know I'm shooting a video later on today where people saying when you stand in front of the judgment, then you're going to know, then you're going to be afraid. No, I won't. the way my mind is constructed, the way the power of my mind is that I will have questions. You know, if you are Yahweh and you are real and this Bible and this Torah was real, dude, seriously with the genocide, you got to explain this. All the rape, all the murder, the lowering women to be beneath the heel of man. You got some answers. I need some answers. And if you can't answer them and you give me the same BS that's in this book, I'll accept any other place than being with you, because I don't want to be with some tyrannical.
The Puerto Ricans say, the Chicano Indians, they said, keep your book. If that's what we got to do to get to heaven, keep your book. Mm-hmm. And it's funny now because now they're all Catholic. So,
you know, the power of a whip and a gun and killing people will change some folks' mindsets.
Or a check.
Or a check. Yeah. You get some people enough money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am so grateful. I had a great time talking to you. I know you got a business to run. And what's the name of your cigar store?
The Cigar Lounge.
Cigar Lounge.
It's called Smoking Phoenix Cigars.
Awesome.
Smoking Phoenix Cigar Lounge. And it's in Stone Mountain, Georgia. So it's a suburb on the east side of Atlanta. And we hang out, we smoke cigars, we talk trash. Depending upon the group that's in here, you'll get a different conversation. And then conversations actually go like our conversation today, where we start out on one subject, go to another subject, circle back around, then go to another subject, go to another one. It's like, yeah, we started out talking about, I don't know, the NBA, but somehow we started talking about relationships, and then we started talking about economics, and it just, you know.
And that sounds wonderful, because it just sounds like a big group of open-minded people that are comfortable and respectful. The biggest thing I look for is just, you can say what you want, and I might even be like, wow, whether I believe it or not. Now I'm gonna go Google that mess. I got to go look it up, because rather than argue with you about what it is that you believe, I'd rather go look it up.
Yeah, and everybody's respectful. Me and my business partner Ghost, we manage the crowd. We know if some conversations are we know the groups. And sometimes when groups intermix, sometimes there are conversations that shouldn't be happening with intermixed groups. Like I got a few groups. Somehow the conversation is going to turn very sexual. And I'm talking, you know, TMI sexual, which I don't mind. But then I know there's another group, if they're in here, you know, they're a little more, you know, closed off. So I tried to balance, you know, you try to balance it so that both groups.
Yeah, don't let it lock the door. Lolo coming. You know Lolo about the trip today.
Right. You know, so we do manage the conversations to a certain degree, but it's very free flowing, and everybody usually walks out. If you go to cigar lounges a lot, you know you got to have thick skin, and everybody usually walks out cool with it, you know, still feeling on the level with everybody else. Your position in life doesn't matter when you walk in a cigar lounge. We have high politicians coming here. We got the joker who can barely afford one cigar coming here.
Do you ship cigars? Do you fill online orders?
I am in the process of putting everything on the website. There's a few of them that's on the website right now, but my inventory is off because I haven't been managing my inventory correctly. Because it's just me and Ghost. So I haven't had the need. But within a month or so, everything will be able to be sold online.
Terry's gonna have to make a request. I'm gonna cop a cigar, and on my way to Canada, I'm gonna drop it off, and then I'm gonna head to Egypt so she can get her one of them Phoenix cigars you got, one of your brands.
Yeah, we do have our. Even though I ran out and my manufacturer is 30 days away from being able to fill my order, I sold the best-selling, the number one cigar sold in here is my cigar, the one I did.
Okay, so you got 30 days to get me this cigar.
30 days.
All right, and then I'm gonna drop it off in Canada. Let me tell you, because for me to ship something to Terry, it's almost like $100 for her to pick it up. I think, but then you said I have to send it in the mail, right? Instead of FedEx and all that, right? Okay.
Even the mail.
Yeah.
So I shut down my popcorn shop a month or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
because I used to own a gourmet popcorn shop.
Hmm.
So I shut that down because in January, don't tell nobody yet, but in January, I'm moving to Puerto Rico. So I can maintain this one up here without me being present. I can't maintain the pop. I did that because it's 3 doors over. I can't maintain the popcorn
That's
shop
wonderful.
without me being here. But I used to have these women in Canada, and they was all women in Canada who used to order popcorn, and they were willing to pay the shipping. The dang on shipping was more expensive than the popcorn.
Wow.
Like if they ordered like $60 in popcorn, the damn shipping was like $80. Canada's foolish. It's crazy. I had to stop.
Y'all don't got no good popcorn up there. Like, what's going on with your popcorn?
No, he just must have the best popcorn around. That's all. But there's ways, you know, I don't live that far from the border. So now apparently I can go across the border now and I can pick up the stuff in just on the other side. I have a post office box. So then you're just paying the shipping to within the States. But if you ship it to Canada, it's like 3 times the cost. It's stupid.
Hey, you sound like a bootlegger or something. But what's going on with you?
I know she ain't picking up regular products. She ain't getting her Amazon and regular. Got that Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
Getting that Macallan.
I'm multi-layered, Erika.
All right. I love it. She surprises me. Our first conversation, we had like a session together. And then I said, Terry, come join me on, we're going to talk about sex today. And we've been together ever since. Dragged her. We dragged her into a 3-hour conversation about sex on YouTube.
What the heck have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. It was fun. We said, we having sex with Terry. All right, sex with Terry. Like,
where was y'all on? I think Wednesday I talked about tantric sex. I needed y'all for that one.
She did. You did watch it though, didn't you?
No, I didn't watch the tantric sex one. Darn, I missed it.
It's still on YouTube.
Okay. When you want to let us know your next time.
Nick, we'll join you next time.
We like to talk about sex.
Okay. All right. Good.
And I don't mind talking about women too. Women's issues. Like,
I do want to do more videos like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because me trying to, I can carry the conversation, but sometimes I get tired of hearing my own voice.
I know what you mean, because I'll play this video back and I'll be like, damn, why do you talk so much?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I be struggling. I'm like in 2 places, like, I want to talk to you, but then I'm like, shut up. So how would you wrap up for today? What's your message for today?
Let's see. Well, as with everything, my message is always, you are a divine created being. And there is no one way to find that. Whichever way that works for you is the way that you need to find that works for you. So don't allow anybody else to tell you what your journey is. Don't allow anyone else to determine who you are. What works for you works for you. And the right tribe will come around you as you reach out and start this stuff. So like the Gnostic gospel, Thomas says, seek and you shall find, and when you find, you will be troubled. So whatever you find that's new and different from everything that you grew up with, it's going to disturb you. But after you finish being disturbed and you come into your own understanding, you will marvel and then you will reign over yourself. Reigning over yourself is the ultimate goal, because that's what makes all of us better. That's all I got. And I'm going to have to jump because I just had 2 people walk in and I got to.
All right. Well, we're going to
actually work.
We're going to sum up by ourselves, and we're going to get the name of the lounge, and you send that to us later, and I'll put a link in there so people can find it. And you just have a wonderful day, and we totally appreciate your time. It's interesting how he said it will bother you when I'm teaching vision board class. I like to ask agitator questions, and that scratches the surface, right? So it's like, ooh, that hurts, because it peels back, the dead layers, and it agitates to get to a point of better understanding. So I like that.
we have to move out of our comfort zone,
Yeah.
because when we're in our comfort zone, then we're not growing. As soon as we're pushed out of that comfort zone, it allows us to expand our awareness and question, because
Yeah.
it's easy to be in a nice little box and not question anything. It's when we break the walls down from the box and get us into another zone that we can, that's how we grow and evolve. And that's part of what life is about, is our evolution. And each one of us has our own journey, and we can either stay, you know, in this nice little conformity box that makes me feel comfortable, or else we can break it down and just explore more of who we are.
Yes. So like, share. Y'all know this was a great conversation, because he really put together a lot of things that I hadn't read, a lot of things that I hadn't heard. And man, that eye of the needle, that now I'm completely curious. I know when I go back to Egypt, I really want to go to Alexandria, and I want to really take my time. And every time I go back to Egypt, to comb more and more and more. There were so many monuments that I did not get to see. But even those things, they speak to us. You know, even in whatever we read in text, those things really speak to us. The earth and the energy speaks to us. And that's really, you know, the biggest thing. And I really look forward to recording and sharing with you all. And then in the future, taking trips with you all. Terry, we'll have her link is going to be in the description for the, I lost the word.
Linktree.
Tonal alignment.
Yeah, axiotonal alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. And my links are below.
Akashic Records. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing my friends at the Journey to the Truth conference in Illinois. I can never remember the name of that city, but man, that's going to be fun. So I had a great Saturday morning. Woo, this is early for me. So
and earlier for me.
Yeah, this was super
So
early.
it was fabulous. It was worth waking up early in the morning.
It was. Only thing that
fabulous.
makes it better is if I had that coffee, but well, thank you, Terry, for your time.
Thank you, Erika.
And I'm gonna end the